Hey everyone, welcome to Middle Fantasy. I am your host Zack, and today we're going to be talking all about the Dresden Files again. What can I say about it? It's one of my personal favorite book series. Now, I am so excited to talk about Grave Peril. This is the third book in the Dresden Files, and one of my personal favorite out of the entire series, and we're going to talk about it. First, I'll start with a spoiler-free review, and then we're going to go into more of a spoiler discussion at the end of the video. So why don't we grab our wizard sticks, grab our Colt 45s, and pretty much just kick butt and ask questions, possibly when the sun comes up. Why don't we check it out? So what is the basic synopsis of the story? Well, once again, we follow Harry Blackstone Copperfield Dresden and his kind of failing detective business. Well, it's not on his mind currently because spooks, specters, and ghouls are popping all throughout Chicago and causing mischief. It's up to Harry and his friend Michael to figure out what's happening, because when it comes to these attacks, some of them seem random, while others seem personal. And it's a race against time to figure out what's happening. Even the dead hate being dead, and sometimes the things that go bump in the night sometimes have a vendetta. So I might as well get into the prose of the book first. Now, what I love about this book is kind of how Jim Butcher took the first two books and kind of started ripping them apart and figuring out what worked in those books and what didn't, and kind of took all that criticism and all that feedback and really pushed them into one book. I think this is the book that is the culmination of just Jim Butcher figuring out really what makes the potato or what makes the sausage, in a way of just the situation with Harry having interactions with his friends and the police and really the supernatural. And I love that about this book. This book is less a traditional detective story and more of a mystery thriller at times. He really starts to drop the whole detective noir and really goes into those types of narratives with the thriller pacing. You would see this in books such as Trace Navarro by Rick Riordan, or you would see this in The Prestige by Christopher Priest. And this book really stands out because it's less of the detective work and more of the thriller pacing. And the other thing that I have to say that's a pro is the world building. I think Jim Butcher does such an amazing job in this book with coming up with the world building, because the world of Chicago is now much bigger. We understand Harry much more now. You're about 1,000 pages into the series, and now you're understanding kind of what the stakes are. You're understanding different supernatural beings. You're understanding the Never Ever. You're understanding quite a bit, which for me personally, if you're a reader and you're looking for more into your detective books or your fantasy, your urban fantasy, this is the book that really starts to spark your imagination, tries to figure out that there's a larger world out there than just Chicago and Harry's dumpy apartment. And another thing that I loved about this book is the characters. I think Jim Butcher's finally figured out how to make his characters work, really. In the first two books, they're okay. Harry is okay in the first two books, but in this book, you feel for him. You actually have sympathy. Sometimes you don't want to be in his head, but sometimes it works because you just want to, God, you just want to hang out with this guy and just pat him on the back and say, "Are you okay, bud?" Because that's the thing when it comes to this book is Harry is pushed and pushed and pushed, and the only thing that he has to go with him is Michael, who is this person that is the exact polar opposite of Harry in many ways. He's very stoic, he's noble, he always tries to do the right thing, and I guess that kind of reflects in the whole he has a sword that was pretty much given to him by God, and he's kind of this person that's a good rock, that's the best way to put it, for Harry, and they bounce off their comedy, which for me, I love the comedy between them two, because Harry's more like, I don't give two trucks, I just have to figure out, I'll do things my way, whereas Michael is more of the person that doesn't really understand jokes. Yes, he has humor, but he's more of the person that he's just like, okay, Harry, just finish up your joke and we can go on and save the world together. And that's what I love about it. All the other characters, the supporting characters, are so much fun. We have Karen Murphy again, we have Susan Rodriguez, we have new characters such as Charity, Michael's wife, and so on and so forth. And I find that to be one of the strong suits of this book is really it's character focused. Again, for me, maybe because I'm just a character person, I always bring this up, but I love the conflicts with every single character. And Harry isn't just there for the sake of just being there in the narrative, but rather he's there to help these people, and he actually starts to care about them, and people do care about him, because in the first two books, he's kind of a loner. I mean, yes, he has people that accompany him, but usually it's because of happenstance. But now in this book, Susan and him are a couple. Him and Karen are just, friends, but they still tolerate each other. But there's the relationship between Michael and Harry, which is so great and so much fun that by the end of this book, you just have this emotional heartstring, which brings me to the last pro. If you're looking for a book that will hit you right in the heart, this is the book. From start to finish, there is so much heart in this book. There's so much emotion. You'll laugh, you'll cry. And by the end, the last sentence of this book, every time I read it, it crushes me so much inside just because it really shows how Jim Butcher can manipulate his audience in a way of just using his words to really feel for this character that doesn't exist in our world. But yet that's the charm of Grave Peril. And by the end of it, you feel crushed, but at the same time, you feel like the day's won, but at what cost? And now that kind of brings me into the cons of the book a little bit. Now, the cons of this are a little weird because without really going into spoiler, the middle of this book can somewhat drag, especially it goes from fast pace to just dead stop for a little bit. And I can understand why it is the way that it is, but for a lot of people, this seems like mind-numbing because a lot of the conflict just stops and it's more of just figuring out things. And at times, this has a hard thing, but that's kind of the hard part about it, is that it's kind of going from thriller pacing to just a jog back to thriller pacing. So it's run, walk, run. And at times that's fine, but if you're not used to that, you might have a hard time plowing through maybe 150 pages of this book. Though, for me, I didn't see that as a problem, but to a lot of people, it can. The first time that I read it, I did have a hard time with that slog. But as you go on, it just ramps back up. I guess you're getting your second wind a little bit, and I love that. Now, the last thing I'll say about this is, even though the Dresden Files is supposed to be a mystery, once again, the mystery is kind of lacking and is kind of weak in the terms of Harry stumbling upon clues. He's doing less detective work. This is more because it becomes more of the mystery thriller. And this is where, in my opinion, it really works more as the mystery thriller than it does the actual detective work. Because if you're looking for detective work, you're not going to have a fun time. A lot of things he stumbles upon, he figures things out quickly. And I like that, but also at the same time, if you're looking for the wizard detective from the first book, you're not necessarily going to get it. Though the mystery in this is a lot of fun, has a lot of twists and turns, and by the end of it, when you figured out that you thought of everything, suddenly there might be a couple curveballs or a twist in the whole case, and sometimes things that you think is less relevant become relevant, or relevant things become irrelevant, and I love that about this. Again, that's kind of both a pro and a con, but that's kind of the thing is, when you look at the mystery story, there's so many different things in the genre that you can manipulate and twist, but here in Grave Peril, it does work, but you're not getting the detective work. You get more of the payoff than you do getting the setup. The setup's okay, but the payoff is where it's really, really at. And would I recommend this book? Yes, if you've read both Full Moon and Stormfront and you're thinking of continuing, this is the book to really decide it. This is the scale. Like, if you're like 50-50, read this book, give it one more chance. And if you like it, you can continue so much because this book really makes you want to read the next few books and try to figure out what's going to happen. Are the events in this book going to resolve? ? And that's what I love about it. And this is kind of one of those things without going into the spoilery stuff that I really enjoyed. Now, I think we might as well get into the spoilery topics because we're going to talk about this book from a spoiler perspective. So if you don't want to get spoiled, just leave right now. There's going to be a thing down below. So I think the biggest thing I'm going to talk about when it comes to this kind of the major theme of Grave Peril, and that is a story about faith. It doesn't have to be religious faith, but it has to be faith in something because Harry, this entire time, is going off blind faith in many ways. He's believing in things because he needs to believe in them. Same as how Michael believes in, God or a higher power. There's a lot of things in this book about faith because it isn't just necessarily religious faith, but rather things that you believe in, such as Harry knowing that if he takes his deadly mushroom that he'll get into the hospital in time to get his stomach pumped to outwit his fairy godmother, or even the faith of love between him and Susan when she's turning into a vampire, and kind of he knows that if he just uses love, he might be able to get through to her, and even the faith of figuring things out. Things are going to work out in the end, but yet sometimes faith kind of falters a little bit, especially when it comes to that where Susan dumps him. He's on the verge of marrying her, and she leaves him because she doesn't know how she feels and what's her place in the world. Same as how with Michael, he loses his sword and has a crisis of faith where he doesn't know if maybe this is God's plan, maybe this is something that is best he become a family man, worry about his new child coming into the world. Same as with taking care of his family, including charity. And that's kind of the thing that when I think about this, it really hits home, especially the ending part where the most magical words a person can say is "I love you," but yet Jim Butcher chooses to not say it at the end because it's already implied, and it's the faith of love and the faith of just, are things going to work out? Because Harry's quintessentially caused a huge international conflict in the terms of killing a bunch of vampires, and he was kind of acting in the name of the Wizard Council. And what happens with that? Those are kind of the repercussions. And again, when you go into faith, will things work out or will they not? And that's kind of the thing. You have to believe in something, because what happens when you don't believe in anything? Is it just a dark void you're in? Because if we look at when it comes to Harry and his fairy godmother in the story, because I love Leigh so much in the story, just because she is the traditional storybook fae. When it comes to, you don't think of the Tinkerbell fairy, you think of a very much a plotting and cold person. Whereas Leigh, even though she has a nature to herself, because that is just her nature, her fae-like nature of just, I'll give you what you want, but there's going to be a price to pay. It's, again, I guess like the monkey's paw as well, especially when it comes to Harry trying to figure out situations, because when it comes down to it, Leigh is just manipulating him, because if we look throughout the narrative, a lot of the things that he gets from her, especially when he makes his first deal as a kid, is just to get confidence, even though he knew he could defeat pretty much his adopted dad in many ways, and even later on where he needs to use it again to figure out a situation, it's really much, she's just playing him because he already knew what to do. It's just the idea needed to come into his head. There wasn't really anything magical about it other than just he gets duped. Same as with Susan. I love the whole part with Susan and Leigh, where she's pretty much, I can help you, I can help Dresden with this, but you have to give me a year of your memory when she does it. But again, it's her manipulating and just, she's honest, she helps him, she takes a year away, but she takes away the whole year of just her and Dresden, all their memories, rather than just taking a random year, which I absolutely love about her. And she's one of my favorite characters, especially when it comes to the supernatural elements, because she will screw you over, but yet she'll do it with a smile on her face and be sincere while she's at it. And I love kind of the relationship she actually has with Harry, and how they have budding personalities, where pretty much Harry is as stubborn as she is, and he wants his way as much as she wants her way, and to the point of where Harry will poison himself. I love that type of dumb stuff, the idea of one being outsmarting another, and that goes again in traditional fae stories, where the only way to really get out of a curse or get out of one's deal is to outsmart them in a way that's so clever that, the fae might not even think it's the most predictable thing, but yet that's the stuff that I loved about the relationship so much. I guess on the topic of relationships, I should also talk about Susan and Harry's relationship, and how it is pretty much a doomed tragedy when it comes to the story, because when it comes down to it, Susan is trying to pursue the unknown, whereas Harry's there and is like, it's not worth it. You're a good reporter. Try to get out of this. But yet she's the one that persists, and she kind of causes her own downfall. She gets hoisted on her own petard in a way of pretty much, she makes like a fake invite and causes a whole situation within the whole ball when it comes to Bianca and all the other vampires in the court. And it becomes to the point of where the way to hurt Harry is the same way as when it comes to Peter Parker, and why he wears a mask is, if they know your identity, they can hurt the people close to you rather than just hurting you. And I love their relationship so much, and especially in this book, and how Harry, as much as he's trying to do good for the whole greater world, he doesn't do good for himself, which is something that's, again, it's patterns of, he's good at one thing, and that is saving people and kind of just making money this way. But when it comes to things like remembering dates or remembering, hey, just say I love you, he has a hard time doing, until his two worlds kind of collide with the supernatural and his love life in a way where he has to say it to her, and she kind of, for a minute, kind of, her spell kind of wears off, especially when it comes to her being a vampire. And I love that type of relationship that they have, and it's so heartbreaking at the end when Harry tries to propose to her, and she rejects him in a way of just straight up just moving away. She still does the paper stuff, but yet she moves away, not because she doesn't like Harry and she doesn't blame him for what happens, because again, it's kind of both her fault and Harry kind of mucking things up, especially in the ball where she's now a vampire, and kind of just every year on his birthday, she would just send him a postcard that just simply says, I love you. And that's kind of the genius what I loved about this book when it comes to Jim Butcher is the opening and the ending of this book is so good. I think the closing for most Dresden Files books are always, they hit you in the heartstring, even up into Stormfront where there's a lot of monologuing, but there's a lot of heart to it. But yet when it comes to this, the opening of this book is so much more fun. We see this more later on in the Dresden Files, but yet it's an opening that's just, it's not even a cold opening, it's just in media res. They're speeding to a hospital and the adventure's already started. There isn't really a setup. This starts to feel like the ending of a short story that you're just picking up on. And by the end of the story, you feel like it's an epilogue a little bit to Harry because he's kind of alone, he doesn't really know what to do. And in the end, I think the brilliance of Jim Butcher is he doesn't even say, I love you, he just uses those words, those 3 little words, and he just makes it so, oh man, it hurts me so much every time that I read it because it's kind of the emotional thing when it comes to Jim Butcher is he has a lot of setup and the payoffs are always emotional rather than Harry getting a new superpower or figuring something out. Yes, he kind of does when it comes to a lot of the things that he has to sacrifice throughout the story for both love and what to do to protect himself. But in the end of the day, is that enough? And even when it comes to pretty much killing Bianca and the whole vampire court, does it really work? And that's the thing. It's like he's now caused a problem which is going to have repercussions for years to come. And I love that stuff. I think my favorite moment in all this is actually all the vampire stuff that we get here, where Harry dresses up as a tacky vampire. He's pretty much, he just wants someone to punch him in the face. And that's the funniest, most adorable thing I've ever seen, is that he's just dressed in this horrible way that you come to a party this way. And he's like being insensitive and he's just egging them on. But again, it bites him in the ass. And we get a lot of those moments, especially there's going to be payoffs later on. I'm not going to go really into them right now because I'll save those for those books. But I was noticing all the little details of just Jim Butcher just laying these little seeds that are eventually going to grow later on into bigger implications, especially when it comes to Harry losing his temper, but also at the exact same time accidentally murdering people and doing things for himself, but yet he's still staying to his moral principles. He feels bad for what he did, but yet at the exact same time, it's kind of one of those, it's like damned if I do, damned if I don't. And I just love that about Grave Peril so much. And I think that's going to kind of conclude this video for Grave Peril. I say read it, check it out. It's one of my favorite books because it's paced in a fun way. You're going to get a lot of magical stuff. You're going to get a lot of mystery. You're going to get a lot of adventure. And you're going to get a lot of emotion. And this is a book this is the one that you should decide if you continue, I really think, because this is the one that really puts into what the rest of the series will end up being by the end. And personally, it's a book that's a good thriller pace, it's a good mystery at times, and a lot of it has to do with the characters and the heart, and that's just the thing that I absolutely love about it. So check it out if you want to. Well, everyone, thank you all so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you like this video, maybe leave a comment down below talking about what's your favorite book in the series, what is your favorite moment in here. Just make sure to use spoiler tags for that, just in case. Thank you all so much, and if you really, really like this video, consider subscribing down below. I'd really appreciate that. Well, everyone, like always, may your food and drink ever be tasteful, and may your books be filled with fantasy and adventure. Bye, everyone. See ya.